Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into Machine Minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Francisco Martin Rayo, CEO and co-founder of Helios AI. Thanks for being on the show today, Francisco.
Great to be here. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining me. Let's jump into it. So,
Awesome.
As my listeners will know, and you probably know from hearing the show, I like to hand it over to my guests. So can you give us a quick background? Your background is obviously quite impressive. You've got experience spanning various roles and industries. So I'm really curious about the educational journey you've had, your early career, and then we can talk about where you are right now.
Yeah, definitely. So I went to Wharton undergrad where I got a degree in business and then in international relations. And most of my internships when I was undergrad were in finance. And I remember my junior year, I realized I didn't really love being in finance that much. And I decided instead to not take the offer to go into investment banking, and instead started a tech company with three other engineering friends of mine. It was called ViewShare. It was this television technology company that allowed you to watch two different channels on two different screens at the same time. It was a really cool tech. And that failed, I'd say, pretty quickly after we graduated, right? We couldn't get the traction, et cetera, et cetera. And then I ended up going into actually a finance startup. And years later, I was the first non-partner employee. And one of the things that was extraordinary is we started in this tiny little, pre-WeWork office in the Chrysler building, where the joke was where companies went to die. And, the company Axia now has hundreds of billions of dollars in assets under management, et cetera. And I didn't understand how extraordinary it was for a company to do so well so quickly.
Yeah.
But that was a really formative experience for me. And then I went to grad school. Came back out and was looking for other entrepreneurial opportunities, I would say. And started a couple of companies and got really lucky kind of early on. Ended up going into consulting through a friend of mine, and I got put on this project around digital transformations with a woman called Kirsten Davies, who is now the CISO and EVP at Unilever. Really brilliant kind of mentor. And it was the first time that I had been brought into this idea that you could use technology to really transform how an organization works. And it was when you start doing something, you feel like this is the place for me. And so I did that kind of at Booz Allen and at BCG for a long time, about 10 years, I'd say. And at the same time, I was running trying these small startups on the side. And then about 3.5 years ago, I got an offer to come kind of run a company called Deep Labs Artificial Intelligence, where they wanted to bring me on as the chief commercial officer. And it was we knew we were going to raise a Series A. I came in, we raised a bunch of money, and we grew the team to 15 to 60 something people, set up a bunch of business lines. And it was just such a different experience, Greg, where I've been running kind of on the side these smaller entrepreneurial journeys where it's like a one-man show on the side with a little bit of money. And what I had learned from those experiences is whatever type of business you're going into, you have got to have a really good co-founder, and you really have to understand your space. And that really informed kind of when I started Helios with my co-founder, Eden.
Amazing. Yeah. I guess you have to go through that Well, well, let me take that back. I guess you don't have to go through that. Some people are lucky enough to find that and land in that in their first endeavor, which is more rare. But like going through those experiences, trying to do it yourself, trying to do it on the side, you realize what's lacking, and then the difference, like you said, a strong co-founder can make, and going all in on any kind of endeavor, the difference that can make as well.
1,000% agree, right? And I think I had a former BCG reach out to me, and he said, I really want to be an entrepreneur. And I said, what's the problem you're solving? He said, well, I don't really know yet, but you hear a lot, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I really wanted to be in the tech space. I said, well, that sounds great. I said, what's your coding ability? And they said, negligible. And I said, find a co-founder or find another space. Because I remember hiring, dev teams abroad, and I had one pseudo co-founder who quit halfway through. And it's just so important to have someone who can actually help you build that product at the beginning.
100%. Yeah. We've heard it a few times on the show as well, and I hear it at conferences, but the best, well, through the lens of certain VCs, the best companies that they invest in have a subject matter or industry expert, someone who really understands the problem that they're solving or the space that they're operating in, and then the technical person. So whether they're the CTO, co-founder, someone who's built the initial product, whatever it may be, because having someone coming purely from the tech side isn't always the best, because you can over-engineer something, you build something people don't want, you're not thinking about the commercial application. And then just exactly like you said, if you don't have the technical side of it and you're outsourcing everything or offshoring and stuff like that, and you're not technically savvy enough to lead that project, it's a rocky start for sure.
Yeah. And it makes it really hard for you to be responsive to your initial customers.
Yeah, 100%.
If we're really lucky that we constantly iterate, and all of the iteration is based on the latest feedback we're getting from customers. And just the ability to turn on that feedback it's a huge competitive advantage for us.
What initially sparked your interest in the technology sector?
Yeah, it was so I'd been doing these digital transformations, and then I forgot to mention, at the very beginning of my career, I imported avocados from Mexico.
Oh, yes, we talked about that offline. Yeah.
And my wild times, happy to talk through it. It's an incredibly profitable business, but a very strange one. And my co-founder, Eden Jalalar, senior AI ML engineer at Google, had won the Abby Award in 2021. We've known each other for 10 years. We've worked together before. She also used to own a restaurant. And so we had these weird backgrounds of being technologists and kind of the ag food touch point. And one of the things that we realized was, as you started to see kind of more and more of the issues with climate change and more of the impacts of climate change, one of the places where you were going to see that most was in the agriculture sector.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we were seeing this extraordinary evolution of artificial intelligence, where you could compute much more cheaply than ever before. You had pre-trained machine learning models. Obviously, we've seen the evolution of generative AI, which was at the beginning, I'd say, right, we're still ish at the beginning, but wasn't anywhere near where it is today when we started the company in 2022. And our hope was, can we build an artificial intelligence platform that could help predict those agricultural disruptions, and then help everyone from Kroger and Burger King and Walmart and the World Food Program and Save the Children kind of get ahead of some of those disruptions. That was really the ethos.
Amazing. So yeah, you are touching on every area that I want to know, because I'm curious about that founding story and how you and your co-founder came to me, and then for the listeners, really dive into what the tech does and how you do it, or what you can share, because I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard of the company, and now this is a great platform for them to hear about it, and something close to home for everyone. I'm sure we can all relate to the impacts of climate change, how that, whether you're aware of it or not, how that's going to impact your supply chain, your food, your groceries. We're all seeing how inflation is impacting us, and then stuff like this further down is going to make it even worse, right?
Yeah. I mean, 1,000%. We wrote an article last week. It was our most liked article this year, where we did this analysis where you're actually starting to see the fear of climate change start to impact prices even before any disruption actually happens. So to your earlier question, we've built an artificial intelligence platform that predicts both the price and potential disruption of agricultural commodities, everything from soybeans to spinach. Most of the people we sell to are these large CPGs, hedge funds, which obviously benefit from knowing where the price of commodities is going. And we're starting to do some really cool work with food security partners, Save the Children, the World Food Program, the World Bank, et cetera. The way it works is really extraordinary. So we took the world and we divided it into 14 million different hexagons. And then for each of those hexagons, we have daily climate data, temperature, precipitation, cloud cover, humidity, soil type, and we have the information for the last 20 years. And then for each of the commodities we cover, we've created individual machine learning models that can tell you when something is, too wet, too dry, too hot, too cold, and what the impact on that particular crop is at that particular time in that particular place. And then you get to compare that globally. And so what it does is, at any point in time, you could tell me, well, hey, how are, the UK, Belgium, and France had a terrible potato season at the end of last year, for September, October. We flagged that about 6 weeks ahead of time because the platform was saying, what's happening in these regions for this type of crop was actually really negative. It turned out, there was about an 8% loss of potatoes. Potatoes went up by 2x. But this is something that would have been impossible to build even a few years ago. We didn't have access to the data. We wouldn't have had access to the compute. It would have taken a team 2 or 3 times larger to be able to do it. And all of that's changed today, right? I mean, we're a small team of 10, and we've been able, really using cutting edge AI to do something like this.
That's so cool. Yeah, it sounds like it's still very much early days, but you're already getting so much traction, and it's an impactful product in a number of different areas, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even think about the whole hedge fund side of things as well. So it makes total sense.
That has been really interesting, right? Because the top 7 commodities, soy, wheat, corn, coffee, cocoa, palm oil, sugar, they don't make up the vast majority of things that we eat, but they're the most liquid and the most traded. And so there's a limited number of players who play in that space, but they make an enormous amount of money. And so they really value any technology, any data that can help give them an edge, I would say.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's a nice gem for our listeners, because I know we have a lot of aspiring founders that listen to this. So it's like, get into something in that industry. There you go.
But it's, to that point, right? For the aspiring founders, you really have to care about the problem solving, because you're going to spend years of your life on it. And it'll really feel like a grind, right? If the problem that you're trying to solve and the technology you're trying to build and the customers you're talking to, you don't care. I think it just, you really want to like at least the environment and the solution that you're building. And that's it.
That's a good point. It's a very good point. Talk me through a bit about the early days. I know you guys are still pretty early days and there's a lot more to do, but founding a company is never easy. It's never smooth. You've obviously got an awesome co-founder. You both have similar backgrounds from the food space, like understanding the problems that you're trying to solve as well. But how did you go about deciding this was the problem you were going to attack, and how has it been on this entrepreneurial journey?
It was, we officially started the company December 2022, which was one of the worst times to start a company.
Yeah.
I remember when I left BCG to join a fintech AI startup, we ended up raising 40 or 50 million dollars or something. And I had a lot of friends of mine who raised $2 million pre-seeds off of PowerPoint. Friends who were in the middle of their MBAs when very serious firms would say, "That sounds like a great business plan. Here's $2 million. Go do it. Take a sabbatical from your MBA program." And in my mind, I said, "Well, we're going to go raise $2 million. I think that'll be pretty easy. We've got PowerPoint, we've got Figma, we've got a good team." So I launch it in December, And then in January, I started the fundraising process. And pretty quickly, the message I got by February was, you're out of your mind. No one is giving any money to startups that don't have a product and don't have traction.
Yeah.
And that was actually incredibly useful for us because we buckled down, spent, really bootstrapped, built that initial MVP, and it was ugly and clunky and all that, and ended up working really closely with customers. And so our first customer ever was a $150 million a year company out of Canada. They actually ended up coming into our initial round. And then we had another very large enterprise that said, hey, we're willing to pilot with you. Here's our data. And to us, it was really helpful to have both kind of your medium-sized business and this multi-billion dollar business while we were designing our MVP and the product. And so when we went back out to market in kind of June, July, it was a totally different conversation because now we had customers that people could talk to. We had ugly technology, but at least the beginning of the technology that people could use. And the round came together pretty quickly. The other part that was really helpful is, and I tell other aspiring entrepreneurs this all the time, it really matters who your investors are. So our lead investor, Supply Chain Capital, the partner there, Shana Harris, is incredible. She comes from this space. She worked at Mars for a long time. She's been in that. And so the initial conversation wasn't about teaching her about the space at all. It was instead this true understanding of what the big gaps in the space were and how technology could help fill those. And now as an investor, right, our best conversations, our best introductions have come from them. And really, so it really does make a huge difference.
Yeah, we talk about that as well, and I've had VCs on, but it's great to hear from the founder side how much value having the right partner, because it's not just a check, right? Having a right partner that's industry specific, that can make introductions, but sometimes even help with your product, right? If they come from the industry, they know what things you need, features you need, additions you need to make, and what you can get rid of. Sometimes, we human nature, I guess, or sometimes it's like trying to be a perfectionist. You want to add more than probably you need or that people use just because you can. It's like you shouldn't. You shouldn't have to.
Well, it's also like it's a really exciting time.
Yeah.
And so, as technologists, one of the things we struggle with the most is, what parts of the new technology do you add that will actually add value to the end user, and not just the stuff that is new and super cool but the market might not be ready for. I'm happy to take you through go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think when you said not being able to raise straight away was such a good thing for you because you work closely with customers and stuff like that and bootstraps, you by default end up prioritizing, and you don't want to add fluff for fluff reasons. And it's just shiny, it's nice, it's like another thing we can talk about. It's like, well, what are people actually going to use and pay for? Then we'll build off that, right, if we need to.
Yeah, exactly. Like what is the first thing that anyone is willing to give me some cash for?
Right.
Great.
Right.
Are there other people that are willing to write that check?
And honestly, the market from an investment standpoint is still the same now from when you guys were raising over a year ago. Even now, and in the hardware space, you're talking about like what is the route to revenue. Profitability is still way off, right? A lot of these companies, if you're investing a lot in R&D, in hiring and etc., but if you can get someone to pay for your product or your service, that's what VCs are really looking for. And it's double-edged sword in some ways, right? If you've got a moonshot idea, if you've got something that's a longer play, it really has to be compelling. It has to be the right team. You have to have some, traction and a background in the space. But a lot of them are still asking the same questions.
Yeah, and I love your view on this as well, right? Do you feel that because of the pullback to a certain degree, more of those moonshot ideas and riskier business models won't get funded, right? And you won't have that degree of innovation? You're only investing in the tried and true stuff.
Yes and no, which isn't really an answer, but yes, I think that the days of I've got a PDF, I've got our deck, we have a cool idea, and we've got this person from SpaceX give us $20 million as a seed round to go and do whatever. I don't think we're there anymore. And rightly so. A lot of investors have been burnt. And I think it's more so in the hardware space, because now if you just take a step back and you look at AI as a whole and the wave following ChatGPT, there's crazy valuations, there's lots of investment going out, but companies still want to know like investors still want to know route to revenue. And that's a lot easier to get to from a SaaS product than it is a hardware product. And I think those we're seeing less and less of them happen. Apart from, which was the yes and no part, is, and this is my little asterisk, is the humanoids. So we've got the humanoid space where, you've got them raising hundreds of millions of dollars, certain companies or some, which if you're in the space, you'll know who I'm talking about, but raising I think it was like 40 or 60 million off like a white paper. But then it comes to the caliber of the team and what have you done in the space? What's your track record? Do you have like marks of success? Because some of these people do, right? I mean, even if we want to talk bad about the concept or like, hey, it's really far way off, if they've done successful stuff in robotics or in AI before, or if they have successful exits, or they're known in the space, or even if it's from an academia standpoint, like one of the companies, that has a lot of weight to it from an investment standpoint. I still don't think it's the best data point because, again, if you're looking for a return, these are still long plays. But on the whole, when money was really cheap and people had a cool idea and it was like, oh, this is different, this is cool, I'll invest in that and spread my bets, I don't think we're seeing that for a while.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're hearing the same thing.
Yeah. It's a shame, but also I think it's good for the entrepreneurial landscape because it's bringing people back down to earth a little bit and being like, okay, let's actually look at the business. Like you said, take the blow of not getting money. If it was like a few years earlier and you were just like, oh look, we just got 10 million, let's just go and like try a bunch of things because we don't have to do exactly what the client wants, probably makes you a better business person by default. And also from the investment standpoint, like there's more diligence, they understand what they're investing in more, or need to understand a bit more thoroughly, and probably more involved. Less deals, but they're deeper involved.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense, right? And you can, hopefully you have those markers of earlier success.
Yeah. And pushed for that as well. Because I think, again, when money was cheap and you could just raise loads of rounds for fun's sake, you probably didn't have to be pushed to that level anyway. I think that's a whole podcast episode in itself.
Yeah. No, I completely hear you. The one place where I do worry is, we're part of the International French Produce Association and cohort of companies, startups. And, Walmart, Kroger, Taylor Farms, these multi-billion-dollar companies are all part of it. One of the places I think where you need innovation the most is in hardware, ag tech hardware.
Yeah.
And the cycles are brutal because, if you try to sell to a farmer, you've got one shot a year. You've got typically one season. And you're telling them to take a risk on their profit. If you're running 1,000 acres or 100 acres, you tell me to take 5% of that. That could be my margin.
Right.
So, first year you come to me, well, I'll listen to you. I'm not going to do anything. The next year I might do, 2% or 5%. And then the year after that, I might do 10% if it works, right? And so it still takes you, 3, 4, 5 years to show any real traction. And
it's really tough.
Yeah.
I've had a few, I know the ag tech space pretty well, and I've had a few people on the show from that, and it's true. Like, firstly, if you're not in the space in ag tech, in farming, you getting your head around the scale of the operations is pretty wild. Like, it was very eye-opening for me. And then secondly, that one shot a year for a crop, it's a lot to play with. But what I hear about, at least with products that work, when they start testing, you've got like the more innovative, tech-forward mindsets in the space that are like, okay, I'll try it. It's a quick adoption if it works, right? They're like, okay, that worked there. Let's start rolling it out in bigger chunks.
Yeah.
But it really does need to work first time, which
Yeah.
isn't always the
It
case.
does.
One of my previous guests, and someone that's very well known in the robotics space, Daniel Theobald, he was co-founder of
Yeah.
Vector. Yeah, he has his farm out there that he encourages people in the ag tech space to come and just like try it there. I mean, I don't know how big a scale it's going to be for some of them, but at least for like a data point or a test bed, it's a good one to be aware of.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I think it's exactly that, right? I think it'll require some of the larger companies, some of the larger ag tech investors to say, all right, we're going to create this innovation lab for you to try it out and screw things up and learn from that before you start rolling out. I think that can really help accelerate some of that.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any lessons that you've learned so far on this journey? I mean, obviously your previous company you joined just before they raised, so you might as well have been a co-founder there. I mean, you came in to help run that side. You came in just before
they've been running for a few years.
Okay.
I think, and they've been looking for that product market fit. And then they brought us in, me, a CFO, pretty senior chief people officer, et cetera.
Nice.
So it wasn't a 0 to 1, which is what Helios is.
Got it.
I think the best lesson I've learned from Helios is we were really excited. Eden is a generative AI specialist. We launched Circe in October. Circe was, the world's first virtual supply chain analyst. She was on our platform. You could ask her questions like, hey, what are the biggest risks to my supply chain? Which commodities do I need to worry about? I mean, it was beautiful, cutting edge. We got incredible press about it. And our customers hated it.
Why?
We asked all of them, right? And they said, we don't really want to keep there's really 5 to 7 questions we're going to ask. And I don't want to keep asking these questions, and I don't really want to talk to a bot. And I said, well, how do you want to receive this information? And they said, just send me an email and we'll report. And it was heartbreaking.
Emails.
Forget the dashboards. Just get me an email. And can you do a PDF?
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, especially. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's a little disheartening when you build something so great and you're so excited about it and it's getting pressed and they're like, your end user saying, it's too shiny for me. Just if you could print it out and put it on my table, that would be great.
Might as well ask us to fix it.
Yeah.
But, we heard them, obviously, and it was a really hard day, for our CTO, even because it was really her baby, right? She really built this. But what we did is we just took her kind of offline from the front end sense. We used her as our generative AI backend engine. And now we use her to generate hundreds of reports every week. They're all custom.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, because it's the AI engine. It must be whatever they want. Do they put those inputs in?
No, we put
those. So you do those. Okay, great. That's really cool. I mean, ag tech is notorious for one of the industries that I think on the whole is probably less tech adopting and open to. There's so much technology in ag tech, in agriculture in general, but I think things like this are still like maybe a generation away. So having the ability there, or for like the next wave of people to come in, or people that, if you start using it on day to day on your phone at home and you're like, oh, if I had something like this for work, it makes the adoption a little easier, but having it in the back end is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, we'll get there. I agree with you.
Yeah.
The other hypothesis that we have is, we've been right so far. We started it in 2022. You've seen so many more disruptions and failures that you typically that will only accelerate. It's really unfortunate. And I think what that'll do is you have more and more of these agricultural disruptions. You'll have more and more volatility in commodity pricing. It'll really force people in the space to start using more of these predictive analytics tools and start to care. Because to date, if you're, large fast food franchise, and we've heard this from customers, they said, listen, the world has to end. before I don't get my potato. And that historically is true, right? Like if you have a terrible harvest, you're going to send your potatoes to your customers, uh, typically the French fry customers. Interestingly, French fries can only be made from the highest quality potato because you need a certain shape, so they'll look
Oh,
good and a certain starch content. Um,
interesting.
we we didn't know it was, like the French fries you get at McDonald's are like the
The best
highest quality
potato.
potatoes by default.
Oh,
Um,
I had no idea.
so good ad for them.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's funny. Also in their slides, they'll have things like they'll have a clock, but it's a Big Mac, so it keeps moving. It's
that's cool.
Um, but what we're probably going to see going forward is that right now those disruptions are impacting kind of your smaller suppliers. And as things get worse and worse, you're going to see that.
Mm,
And it'll just require much more coordinated action, much more predictive action, much more adaptation of the new environment. It's a difficult place to see right now. Things are, we were doing for a customer, we were doing analysis on the olive growing in Spain. And, they've been in the ground for many years. It's been really difficult. When we first did the analysis, the model we built said, well, the weather is perfect. This is perfectly average weather. And, we knew qualitatively from news articles from the farmers we know there, et cetera, that they were in fact in drought.
yeah.
What had happened is they had been in drought for so long
So now
that the
that's the
model thought
norm.
this was the new normal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And so that
interesting.
we're already entering kind of this new normal of extreme weather in certain crops in certain parts of the world. And what
It's
does that
crazy.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's crazy. So what do you do
It,
in that respect? Like have to get even like more data from, historic data to feed the model, or do you have to just like fine tune it to say like this is actually the extreme that's just, dragging on?
we had to reweight it.
Oh,
Uh, we had to add additional weighting, basically to like historical data to say, don't wait the last 5 years as much as you did the 5 years before that. Wait the last five
yeah,
years more.
got it.
Um, but the coolest thing, or one of the coolest things we're doing is this analysis where we can look at any district in the world, and we've added all these like climatic characteristics. So we can say, all right, in this district, in Florida, right, it is most helpful for growing these types of crops. The districts around the world that look similar to this district are in Italy or Argentina or Japan, et cetera, et cetera. But what's been really helpful about that is, I don't know if you follow Florida citrus the way we do, but they used to, like Florida used to do 200 million boxes
Yeah.
of citrus every year, right? It was this powerhouse. They're down to 20 million
Wow, from 200 million
from 200. It's an absolute disaster. You talk
in
to
what
Marco
sort of
Rubio's
period of
people,
time?
I think the last 5 or 10 years, it's
That's
been pretty,
insane.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It's been shocking, right?
Yeah.
So, you buy that Florida's natural juice,
Hmm.
most of it is now coming from Brazil.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's been a combination of, a lot of climate change and then some of the, impacts associated with that. And part of the problem is, you're trying, the state government is now paying farmers not to sell their land to real estate developers,
Yeah.
even though they're no longer growing citrus, because they like, understandably, this idea of, keeping a degree of domestic food security. But the work we're doing there with some of the farmers there is saying, all right, well, your district in Florida looked like this 10 years ago when you could grow citrus. 5 years ago, it looked different. Today, it looks very different. If these trends continue, what will it look like 5 and 10 years from now? And what are all the other places around the world that have those same characteristics, and what are they growing there? And our hope is that once you have that information as a farmer, as a local, federal, state agency, you're able to say, well, maybe we shouldn't be growing citrus anymore in Florida
Yeah.
because it doesn't work. We should be growing pomegranates and passion.
Interesting.
And
Smart.
that's how you start to adapt, right?
Yeah.
Because if we don't adapt, we'll continue to have these crop failures. We'll end up in a very bad.
That's powerful. And obviously very, very relevant. I mean, if you've got the land and you have the expertise, why would you not want to grow what makes the most sense? What's going to be
Yeah.
successful? Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking about building, let's change gears into teams and, startup building, how important it is to have like a strong team. Um, it's normally one of the biggest hurdles for people, especially at the get-go. And then as you gain that traction, you have like more and more need and reliance on experts as you want to delegate or push the envelope a little bit. How crucial is that from your perspective, and how have you gone about assembling the team?
It's everything. I think if you, I'd say a couple of things that have been really helpful for us. One, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to hire the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
Fire them as quickly as you can. Don't let it fester. There can always be reasons why, but especially at the beginning, you have a really small team, you have a limited runway, you're building your culture. It's really important to send the right signals. Two, the thing that we have found most helpful and the rock stars we have now are folks that are, almost all around athletes. So, Brooke Schuyler is our head of product and head of design. We first hired her because she was an incredible designer and she wanted to get into product. And it has been, in a couple of hours, one of the best hires I've ever done in my life. I've hired a lot of shit. 39, I've been through this. And what makes her so special as a professional is her ability to be that general athlete, right? Where you're really good at what we hired you to do, but you're also crushing building out product roadmaps and you're doing a lot of our marketing work, et cetera. Our front end developer, Ruta Bremane, she's trying to become more of a full stack developer. And so she's doing code pairing sessions with our back end developers so she can do both the front end and the back end. And that's the personality, I'd say, and the character trait that we've looked for that has been most helpful in hiring people that can be really successful, because there are never going to be enough people to do all the work that needs to be done, and you're never going to get to hire, at least at the seed stage, right? Maybe at the Series B, someone whose job it is just to do partnerships, and someone whose job it is just to do design.
Yeah.
And so those athletes have been really helpful.
That's great. Yeah, it's very true in a startup that you want to have people that can, as cliche as it sounds, but wear multiple hats and can pivot on a dime and add value in a number of different areas. It's so true.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah, it's made all the difference. And I think it's everybody works really hard all the time. You want someone who understands that.
Yeah. Especially when you go into a startup, having something and we've seen this with like the most recent generation going into the workforce, that it's not just a career path or a check or anything like that. It's the impact that they're having, or having something that's like more meaningful above the money, like being part of a solution. Climate change is a great one. That's worthwhile cause of the time and effort that you're going to put into it. And that helps with people's engagement. And then also in the startup world, working longer hours, problem solving, being passionate, it makes a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
1,000% agree. Yeah. Especially, one of the things that's been most surprising for us since we started is we've probably hired half as many data scientists as we thought we would need to.
Really?
Because we have Copilot, right? And so a lot of the work that would have been delegated to a first-year data scientist, you now have basically generative AI that can help you build that and scale it in a way that would have been impossible before. Really, OpenAI, right? You have to give them credit. And so that's been a huge savings for us, but also has put a tremendous amount of pressure on, new data scientists, folks that are just graduating with that degree. It used to be one of the best careers you could go into, right? And now you say, well, what is the value of me bringing on a brand new data scientist for a data scientist with 1 year of experience? And I think it requires them to be much broader in their skill set and much more flexible in their skill set than they would have been even 2 years ago.
True. Yeah, there's other areas or other strings they need to add to their bow, and then probably themselves utilize the tech. How can I do more
Yeah, that's a
utilizing what
great
other
point.
people are that's just going to catapult if you adopt it. And I was having this conversation before the show, but AI, it's not going to fully automate, but it's going to augment, and how we utilize it to make our jobs easier, but also higher output, higher quality, be able to do more. And adopting that is basically where we're going to be able to excel in anything that we do, any
Yeah,
career path.
I think, yeah, I agree with that. I think think of it as a normal distribution, right? And so at the bottom of your, you know, normal distribution, you have kind of jobs that you're never going to automate because the ROI is just too low, right? Folding towels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you can automate it, but it's so expensive, you could just pay someone very little. At the higher end, you've got, neurosurgeons, really, experienced data scientists, et cetera, who are going to work with AI and are going to do incredibly well.
Yeah.
And the scary part is in the middle, you've got all of these kind of core middle class jobs, some back office jobs, some more basic jobs that are likely to get automated. And the only way for us to not enter this, horrible economic recession where you're just firing the middle is to see how we can use AI to really upskill a lot more of these jobs and get 50, 100% more productivity out of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the job used to be even a call center job, you don't need that job, right? That's disappeared. QAing job, that will disappear. Because those things that are repeatable that you can automate, that should no longer be a job in the age of AI. And what can we do as a society to make sure that for the person being impacted, we can create a pathway to another job?
So true. I think it was the founder of NVIDIA, Jensen. I was listening to another podcast called Acquired, and they went pretty deep into NVIDIA. And he was talking about, AI and everyone's fear of taking jobs and stuff like that. And where that isn't the case, especially in his mind, is like because humans are forever and untapped ambition. So we could just continue if there is something that's going to help us do more and make us achieve more, then we're going to figure out other new things to do. It's obviously the growing pains, and like you said, you don't just want to completely outsource all of those and replace all of those middle jobs. But if you're in a role and now AI is going to enable you to do more, you're probably going to have more brain power, capacity, time, and probably, imagination to do things that you never thought you were going to do beforehand, whether it's work or free time, hobby, business, whatever it is.
I love that term. I hadn't heard that, but I think that's a really true and really positive way of looking at it.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
I've heard it in robotics as well. I, again, can't remember because I'm in all these talks and conferences, but talking about, robotics, we always talk about the dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs, right? Automating those or having robots do those so it can free up the humans to do other things that robots shouldn't be doing. Or like you said, like the stuff that doesn't make sense to automate, or the things that just aren't reasonable to automate right now from a cost perspective because it's going to cost too much, or abilities. So now we have more time and we have more freedom to do the things that are going to upskill us. Maybe we become operators, maybe we can, study more in a different area or apply our skill sets in places that they weren't being utilized beforehand. But,
and how do you, that's a great point. And how do you create those pathways for people who used to do kind of the dull and dirty and dangerous jobs and say, well, you don't have to do that anymore. Here's the other job that's much more interesting. You just have to get the skill sets. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Okay. I'm sure we're getting close on time here, so I don't want to run out. Let's talk about the future of this space, because you're obviously in such an exciting and impactful space right now at this intersection of AI and supply chain. And obviously we all, whether we like it or not, care about food. It's very near and dear. So what exciting trends are you seeing emerge in the industry, or that you're most excited about over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think what has been really extraordinary is just the speed at which artificial intelligence is evolving. Even in the short time that we've been running the company, it's made extraordinary leaps and bounds that we've been able to take advantage of. And, being able to generate hundreds of custom reports per commodity per customer would have been impossible before, right? It's an extraordinary productivity increase. We expect that to continue to happen, where you continue to see these not incremental progress, but really kind of leapfrogging what was even possible before.
Yeah.
That's a really exciting space. And I think the only thing that constrains us there is how can we as humans and organizations and change our way of working to take advantage of it? That's where I think we'll be slower than expected.
Yeah.
I am cautiously optimistic that technological solutions will help us mitigate some of the problems we're having with climate change. I do see more and more of that mindset shift where people say this is a problem for all of us, right? We have to figure out what our food security needs are, how we start thinking of getting around and mitigating agricultural disruptions, how we make sure we don't have as many crop failures as before. But I think it's going to take a lot of pain before you have the full ecosystem change in such a way that you're able to get there. One of the farmers we work with most closely is kind of a large Brazilian farmer. They plant a lot of coffee. It takes about 5 years. It costs you about 40,000 reais per hectare to plant coffee trees. It takes you about 5 years to make the money back. Over the last 7 years, they've had 2 unexpected frosts. Frost will typically kill your trees. And, his biggest question is, should I continue to plant coffee trees? Or should I no longer be planting this type of crop in this particular place?
Yeah.
And even if you were able to identify, hey, here are the types of crops that I should grow, or, hey, I should go from conventional to organic. Right now, there is no way for him to finance that transition. Your major agricultural banks like Rabobank, rightly or wrongly, don't finance that type of stuff. They say, we will loan you money to grow soybeans and you're going to pay us the money back at the end of the year.
Yeah.
If you want to transform from a conventional to organic, from non-sustainable to sustainable, or from coffee to something else, that is your problem. And I think that dramatically has to change because otherwise we will not make it. And I'm hoping that, we'll have more of these conversations. You'll have more of that access to information that does show you how things are changing. It'll finally create the impetus that we need as a global society to say, all right, we're willing to make those investments to start adapting to climate change and not just continuing to have these conversations around mitigating, right? I think we really have to start thinking about it differently.
It's interesting. Yeah. Something I never thought about. Well, I guess if you're not in the space, you would have never thought about, but huge opportunity there, huge finance opportunity as well, and need.
1,000%. Absolutely.
Okay.
Right. And how do you do it, right? Is it a public-private partnership with, the World Bank and the IMF and, USAID with some private capital? Probably, right? Because then you can defray some of those costs. And, to our earlier conversation, the VC model, right, is premised on making a ton of returns from a few of your portfolio companies, ideally in a relatively short period of time, right? That is a totally different funding model than what the farmer is asking you to change the field.
Yeah.
And so how do you create the right economics around that to make that investment?
Interesting. Yeah, definitely a bigger problem to solve than just a bank, but one that needs to be addressed, it sounds like, sooner rather than later, because these are quite long time horizons. If you're going to pivot your crop and then it's going to take X amount of time to even earn that money back, grow the crop in general. I mean,
absolutely
scary to think about. Yeah.
It'll be, but there's not just us, obviously. There's a lot of thoughtful, passionate people thinking about the problem.
Good.
I think we are at a golden age of technological evolution. We have no idea what 12, 18 months will look like, right? Maybe we'll get artificial general intelligence with the next release of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Rumors are that they're quite close to it. How does that help? What does that mean, et cetera?
It's definitely an exciting time.
Yeah,
definitely. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Before we go, any advice that you want to give to any aspiring entrepreneurs looking to make their mark in the space, or any resources?
No, always happy to chat with them. I'm f@helios.sc. it's whatever's on the t-shirt for the folks that are on watching this on YouTube. I think just find a problem you really care about, and I think it makes all the difference in your life. Right? It is truly a privilege to be able to start and run a company on something that you care deeply about. Yeah. And I think it's something that Eden and I, my co-founder, take very seriously, but also derive a lot of joy from. So
that's amazing. Thank you. Where can everyone follow you and the company and all of your progress?
Mostly on LinkedIn. We're very, very active on LinkedIn.
Good.
Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. It's just Francisco Martin Rayo, Helios. Yeah. And, please reach out if there's anything I can ever do to help.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you so much again for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure our listeners will get a lot from it. So thanks again, and hopefully we'll have you on down the line again to hear about all your progress.
Sounds great. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.